All right, they didn't beat the Indiana Pacers, and it was frustrating at times, but I'm going to tell you why this was actually a good loss by the New Orleans Pelicans. It's a Thursday episode, a live episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all immediately after it is a Wednesday night. That's what day of the week it is. Coming to you right after the Pelicans lose 123-114 to the Indiana Pacers. It was frustrating at times, but you know what? I actually was kind of encouraged by the Pelicans in this. We'll get into some things they did really wrong that they need to improve upon, but there was a lot working against New Orleans in this one, and for them to kind of fight the way they did, for everyone to play, just simply play, I thought it was actually an impressive thing, so we're going to break it down. If you're watching along live with me on YouTube, let me know what you think. Was this a good loss, a bad loss, just like a whatever loss? Let me know what you think. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. And of course, become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode is brought to you by Grammarly. Make a bigger impact at work with Grammarly. Sign up and download for free at grammarly.com/podcast. So let's get into this one, the loss to the Indiana Pacers. There's a couple of different ways that you can read into this one. If you want to say it's a good loss, that's fine. If you want to say it's a bad loss, I get into that too. Let me be very clear. Not all was perfect for New Orleans. They had chances to win this game and they just couldn't get it done. But here's the thing about this game. So many things were working against them. Right? First and foremost, I do think the Pacers are a very bad matchup for New Orleans. We'll get a little bit more into that in this segment here. Two, with all of this, I also think that, playing on the second night of a back-to-back. The story that I heard earlier today was they had a lot of flight issues. They got on their plane around 11:30 midnight Eastern time, got on the plane had trouble. They did deplane, wait for a new plane to come in, plane gets service. They then get on the plane. They land in Indiana around 5:30 in the morning. They don't get to the hotels till about 6 in the morning for a 7 p.m. game, right? Like, that's not a great situation for you to try and go out and, get a victory. You could see, especially in the beginning part of the game, they were tired. They didn't have their legs under them as much. So to fight back from 20 points down, get it as close as 3 points was actually kind of impressive to me, right? Zion didn't get any sort of help or calls from the refs early on in this game. They were down 20 right away, and yet they kept fighting. I was pretty pleased with that. This was a game that after the first quarter, they could have just given up, right? Just said, you know what? No, we're not going to do this. We're not going to deal with this. We're just going to punt on this game and we'll deal with this team because they play them next on Friday in New Orleans, where we have a much better chance of getting a victory. And they didn't do that, right? I loved that. That was awesome. They showed some fight, some spirit, and you don't always see that from this team. The other thing that I kind of liked about this game, and I mentioned that the Indiana Pacers are a rough matchup for New Orleans. How has New Orleans been winning the majority of their games? They kind of alluded to this without getting to the heart of it on the ESPN broadcast, which is what I watched. They talked about how the Pelicans have a great point differential in the second quarter. They have a great point differential in the second quarter because their bench beats up on opposing benches because they have more depth here. But the Indiana Pacers also have depth. They have a pretty deep team that does similar to what the Pelicans do. Their starters don't always run opponents off the court. It's guys like Jalen Smith coming in, TJ McConnell coming in, Ben Shepherd coming in, right? Those guys coming in off the bench and making an impact. And they did in this game. So that negates one of the Pelicans' biggest advantages. So if you wanted to win this game, your stars were going to have to try and carry you. And for the most part, they kind of did. I know a lot of people are upset with Zion and CJ in this. I think kind of given the circumstances, they were all right. They weren't turning the ball over. CJ didn't have one. Zion only had one. Zion wasn't as effective because he wasn't getting to the line. 23 points isn't a horrible game. 10 of 20 shooting is not great for that, right? CJ hit 5 threes. You needed that. He kept them in the game at times before missing 2 buckets late in the game. We'll get to that in the next segment here. And then Brandon Ingram was flat out fantastic. This was one of the more complete, better games I think we've seen from Brandon Ingram in a while. 30 points on 20 shots. He was aggressive, driving into the paint, trying to carry this team, and he did a really good job. They should have won with a performance like that from Brandon Ingram. If you get a little more from Zion, a little more from CJ, or anybody else, you can try and actually win this game, or you're in a good position to do that. That's a bit of a recipe for success with Brandon Ingram playing like he did. You're going to win more games. He took threes. He took threes on kick-out passes. He took threes in transition. He took early offense threes, 5 of them. That's a good number to build off of, and you're seeing him start to adjust his shot profile a little bit more. And I think it's going to lead to good things for the Pelicans. So when looking at this game, yes, it's frustrating, it's disappointing, but with so many things working against him, to get the stars kind of carrying him. Zion got this team going right away in the second and third quarters, right? BI kind of did it throughout all of it. CJ had his moments. A little bit more consistency would be nice, but it wasn't that they weren't working together. They were. It was just a couple of other things that really lost them this game. They hadn't been playing well together. So seeing these guys do this, I'm a big believer in that is something that you can kind of build off of going forward. We're gonna get into more where there's an issue with that too, and that's gonna be here in the next segment. So I liked how well the stars played for the most part. The other thing that I was very impressed with, and this is maybe the biggest reason when I was thinking and planning to show out all the games going on, and I was trying to figure out, what we're going to talk about, what do I think is kind of the lead thing here? What's the one big takeaway that I want you to have from this game, which is what I like to put in the first segment of the show. It came from this. It came from Willie Green's interview, and we'll touch on this in the next segment too. We'll let this one kind of go into that. I thought Willie Green was really good in this game. I actually thought Willie Green, who we've been very critical and deservedly so of at times this year, was really good. He made the right kind of adjustments, and he had a quote in between the quarters that I thought was really telling and something that you can look at and go, oh, maybe he gets it finally. And that had to do with the offense, right? The offense struggled again, and then how that impacted other areas of the game, I thought was really important to realize how these two things are connected, something that I've been talking a lot about. Let's break that down coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about eBay Motors because our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you the players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Benedict Mathurin of the Indiana Pacers. Mathurin is in career best form and posting numbers in multiple categories. There's concerns of consistency there, but while he's rolling, he's worth using, and he was pretty impactful, I thought, in this game here. 4 made threes. So unfortunately, maybe he helped, maybe good for you that he helped your fantasy team. So Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same for your vehicle. I work on all of my cars. I just put in a new window into the old classic Corvette, had to order a bunch of parts with it, got them all from eBay Motors, because with over 122 million parts for your ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Whether you're into style, performance, speed, whatever it is, they have it, and it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. And at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your vehicle on the road at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, the #1 Pelicans podcast. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. and become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans and support the channel that way. Comment down below. Do you think this is a good loss or a bad loss? Who you blaming? Who you giving credit to? Let me know. Keep the comments rolling here. So let's go back to Willie Green. I said this at the end of the last segment that I thought Willie Green was really good in this game. And it came from a quote that he gave on the ESPN broadcast in between the first quarter and the second quarter when they said, wow, the Indiana Pacers put up 40 in that first period, right? 40 points. They won the quarter 40-24. What do you need to do to make your defense better? We all know Willie Green, don't we? What are we going to say? Oh, we need to protect the paint. We need to close out on the three-point line. We need to play more better defenders out there. But that wasn't the case. One thing that I keep trying to stress, and if there's one takeaway from this season of Locked On Pelicans here that I hope you have, is that everything is kind of connected. This is something I've talked a lot about this year and in years past too. Your offense is connected to your defense. Your defense is connected to your offense, right? So when your offense is just missing or has nothing going or is stagnant and easy to defend, a team like the Indiana Pacers, who like to get out and run and push the pace, are going to eat you alive. And when that happens and they're scoring in transition being basically the top way to score points in terms of efficiency, you don't really miss in transition like you do in other things or other areas of the game. You're just giving up easy points and your defense doesn't stand a chance. Your defense doesn't stand a chance at all here. And the Pelicans, by having bad offense, killed their defense. It's not that they were getting blown by or didn't have a good plan or couldn't defend the corner three. It was that the Pacers were in transition and had a man advantage. When you're playing 4-on-3, 5-on-4, offensively, you have a significant advantage. The defense isn't going to be doing anything there. Defenses in the league in general right now can barely defend 5-on-5. So to play a man down, you're going to give up open corner threes. Guys are going to get beaten. Someone needs to rotate. They rotate over a little late, which is tougher to do anyway. You're going to get beaten at the rim. That's what happened here. You can look at the fast break points in this one. Indiana had 21. The Pelicans had 8, right? That is a 13-point difference in a game that the Pelicans lost by 9. Think about that for a second. It was their offense breaking shots, missing shots, letting Indiana get out and run. It wasn't that their half-court defense was bad. It was actually good, right? It was that your transition defense wasn't good, and no one's transition defense is good. But here's the thing. So that's disappointing, right? Like, that's frustrating that happened. Happened in the first quarter, happened late in the fourth quarter here too. But at least Willie Green recognized it. Now, did he make some of the best adjustments for that? No, we'll talk about that here in a second. But he at least acknowledged that was the thing. And it wasn't like we need to defend harder. It was, no, we gave up 40 because we need to play better offense. I don't know if that's a light bulb going off for head coach Willie Green, but it allowed him to make the right kind of adjustments, put Hawkins out there, get another shooter out there on the court, which helped things. Could he have played Matt Ryan more? Absolutely in this game over, say, Najee Marshall. Absolutely, I think that would have helped more. So he wasn't perfect. But the fact that he acknowledged the thing that I here have been screaming about, that a lot in the media have really seen and been frustrated with, and at least acknowledged it, maybe there's a path going forward to fix some of these issues. Maybe, right? You could call this a baby step forward, but the problem when you have 24, 23, I forget the exact number of games left, that's a problem because you're running out of time to get this right. It's one thing to acknowledge it, but then you got to do something about it. That's the remaining question I have for Willie Green, pretty much just the remaining part of this season, right? That's important. But the fact that he admitted that for a dude who loves defense and loves guys like Najee who don't give you offense and things like that, I don't know. That was kind of something that I was okay, I at least like hearing that. I thought the defensive adjustment that he did make to go to a 2-3 zone defense worked. You started forcing some misses, and then the Pelicans were able to get out and run. Scored in transition. I think Zion had 8 straight points, right, in the second or third quarter. And then once he scored, the defense would get back, and then they could force another turnover, get out and run, get back while the Pacers inbounded the ball. And that's how those sorts of things start to interact, right? One builds off the other, which then builds off of that, which then builds off of that, and so on and so forth. And so those sorts of things are progress and things that actually get me like a little bit excited. Now, they lost another clutch game, right? Like they cannot win a late game situation at all, and that's a problem. So that's disappointing to see because the issues with the offense came back up late in the fourth. It was the same thing that we saw in the first quarter. So while New Orleans, again, if we're calling this a good loss for the Pelicans, right? And there's another part of this being a good loss that's more of a mindset thing that we'll talk about in the next segment here. So while we're talking that New Orleans, this is a good loss for the Pels here, right? Because they beat the Indiana Pacers for 3 quarters. They beat them in the second. They beat them in the third. They beat them in the fourth quarter. They outscored them in all 3 of those quarters. But it was that awful first quarter that doomed them. So it's great that they fought back. But you've got to cut this stuff out in the first place. The starters, which struggled in this one in the first quarter, need to do that again, right? Like that is so disappointing to be able to see. And then have the same issues creep up in the fourth quarter where he couldn't get a bucket. And then it allowed Halliburton to just either score himself or zip 2 great passes to Siakam, who is just kind of like in there in the middle of the defense doing all of that stuff. There's things to build off of, but you've got to eventually figure it out. And so far, the Pelicans haven't. It's diagnosed correctly. We know what's wrong with this team. Do it. Or don't. And you'll be a play-in tournament team, right? You're hovering around there. They won't drop out of the play-in tournament by any means. But you're not going to be safely in the playoffs that you would like. You won't win 49 games, which they're on pace for right now, which I would like to see with a chance of getting 50. So there were some really positive things here. Like there were some really positive things given, again, everything was working against New Orleans in this game. Everything was working against the Pelicans in this game. But that doesn't like excuse it. You know, a little bit. We wouldn't be bringing it up otherwise. But overall, this is a team that like down the stretch needs to figure out how to close games. Right? Is it more offense? Is it more shooters? Okay, then you've just got to do it, right? You know, the problem is trying to find that balance. If you're watching the ESPN show, Zach Lowe mentioned that this Pelicans team took off once they played Zion at the 5. And then they had a big advantage, not really a big advantage because it's a small lineup. They had an advantage, significant advantage, that's the word I want to use, against the Indiana Pacers and went on a run. And someone was like, well, the Pelicans could do that, right? And then Zach Lowe goes, but can you defend? I think they've proven they can defend at a pretty high level. I think that if you were to eliminate those fast break points here, which weren't scored in half-court offense, this Indiana Pacers team didn't do as well as you would like. Then they score 102 points. That's a pretty good number to hold a team to. So there was, again, a lot of positives, but they need to really start to kind of figure some of this out. I did think Willie Green going more with Larry Nance Jr. when JV wasn't really working was smart. It allowed him to play a zone that Jonas Valanciunas wouldn't have been able to do. So having him off the court, going to that zone defense while Larry was out there, I thought was a great way to kind of negate the disadvantage that Larry Nance Jr. has against someone like Miles Turner and all of that. So again, we can be frustrated with the loss, certainly, and I am. It would have been nice to win. You know, it would have been nice for them to get in at the proper time, get an extra couple hours of sleep, all of those things. But there was definitely some positive things here, starting with head coach Willie Green and with him just like acknowledging what's going on with the team. So here, you want to know my favorite thing here? My favorite thing about this game? Everyone played. Everyone played. Of the people that could play right now. No Dyson, no Jose Alvarado. That's bigger than you think, like significantly bigger than you think. And I'm going to go into the reasoning behind that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Grammarly. No matter what kind of work you do, how you communicate is key. Whether it's emails, reports, presentations, they're all equally important to the collaboration needed to get things done. And Grammarly can help because Grammarly is your AI writing partner to help you communicate more effectively and efficiently so you can make a bigger impact at work. Whether I'm working on a project, this isn't my full-time job, or kind of trying to brainstorm and come up with ideas, I don't do well when I stare at just like a blank document on a computer. I need some lines on there, and if I don't have that, I can't really get rolling. With Grammarly, it can help you come up with that. And once I get 1 or 2 sentences from Grammarly on there with some prompts that I put in, I start rolling, the creative process starts happening, and work gets done. So save time with one click and go from editing drafts in hours to seconds. And that's why 93% of professionals using Grammarly Premium report that it helps them get more work done. So Grammarly is the gold standard when it comes to this, and the gold standard of responsible AI with 14 years of experience in just about every IT certification under the sun. So make it a bigger impact at work with Grammarly. Sign up and download for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. That's Grammarly, Grammarly.com/podcast. Easier said and done. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen. Today and every day, we're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know, even after losses like this. I see a lot of good things to come out of this, but it's lessons that the Pelicans need to internalize and then do something about, right? No Matt Ryan in this game after the game he had the other night seems like a misstep there. If it's really the offense which is killing your defense, and that is absolutely the case, do something about it. Go more offensive, right? You could have made the claim that maybe they should have played Jonas Valanciunas more than 7 minutes too. So there's reasons for these things not being this loss being frustrating, but overall I want to look at it from a positive light given everything working against New Orleans. One of the things that was working against New Orleans here too, right, was their health. CJ McCollum has missed the past couple of games. He was listed as questionable. Brandon Ingram rolled his ankle against the New York Knicks literally last night. Stayed in the game. After you come out that game, if it swells, it can be rough to deal with the next day. He was listed as questionable. Zion Williamson has been listed as questionable for a couple of games now. We also know they've kind of treated him with kids' gloves, don't want him playing back-to-backs, right? Trey Murphy listed as questionable. These guys are on only a couple hours of sleep. They got into Indianapolis about 12 hours before tip-off. You need to be at the arena like 4 hours before the game. 3 hours, 2 hours before the game, right? Like some of that is all working against you. It would be very easy for Zion, Brandon Ingram, less so CJ, but still CJ, and Trey Murphy to be like, this isn't a good situation for us to play in. We could get hurt more. We're going to just take this game off and not done anything, right? Easily could have been the case there. And they didn't do that. And I love it. The Pelicans playing, particularly on national TV, which probably had something to do with it too. You know, playing when they're listed as questionable is not a trend we've always had here in New Orleans. It's usually if they're questionable, they're not playing, and that's kind of part of the problem, and then they lose a game in very disappointing fashion. That didn't happen here, right? You know, when you're looking at guys, and if the question was, will they rest Zion in this game? The players, the coaching staff, the medical staff, the training staff, the front office can go to these guys and go, hey, we want to rest you. We think that's smart. Sometimes they have data and analytics behind it and all of that, right? So they can go to the player and be like, we don't want you to play. And the player can often be like, cool, going to send this one out, not going to do it at all. But the player can, in general, usually override that decision. You know, when a guy is listed as questionable here, it's kind of up to Zion if he's going to play or not. It's going to, you know, be up to Brandon Ingram if he wants to play or not. The fact is, all of these guys said, I want to play, right? Zion has been healthy this season. That's a big step forward, right? Him just being healthy and available, playing in February here. So that's been a really good thing. So he could easily take this night off, right? There's questions about his work ethic, you know, the whole Stephen A. Smith thing, all of that, you know, asking if he really cares about basketball. For him to say, like, I'm playing in this game because I want to go out there and I want to win and I want to help my team and I'm not going to be lazy, says something, right? Same thing for Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram is one of those guys we've seen in years past where if he's not 100% healthy, he's not going to play. But he stayed in the game against the New York Knicks and apparently told Zion, like, I'm not going to leave you out there hanging. I'm going to tough through this injury with the rolled ankle and play. And then he played in this game tonight. I think that's a really great attitude from this team that we haven't always seen. So there were so many things, again, working against them. And these guys go, no, we're going to play. Now, you might make the argument of they're paid millions of dollars to play a kids game, so they should be dealing with all of this. Sure, whatever. I don't care because that's not how it actually works in the NBA. It's not about what they should be doing. It's about how it actually works. And they played, right? They kind of bucked the normal trend here, and I liked that they did that. It's saying something about these guys and the hunger and the fight. And that's why I think you also saw them stay competitive in this game and not just give up. And so that's what I kind of loved about this. These guys actually playing, all of them playing. Trey, CJ, BI, Zion. That was fantastic. So many things working against him. I don't know. They kept it close, got it within 3, showed fight. Willie Green acknowledged some stuff that we want to see. I'm going to call this a good loss if you don't make any changes or don't make any real progress. I always hear people being like, using the word accountability. I don't really think people truly know what that means, right? It's one thing for Willie Green to hold himself accountable and be like, the offense needs to be better. We need more to side movement. But if you're not going to play players that do that, is that truly being accountable, or did you just acknowledge a thing? This is a game that I'm going to call a good loss, because if they change, they've learned something for it. If they continue to do the same old, we're going to look back on this, and I'm going to come back, revisit this show and go, no, it's a bad loss, because you said all the right things, but you got to do something about it to avoid situations like this. Indiana's not bad. They're not good. You could have won this game. Disappointing they didn't, but we're going to call it a good loss. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments down below on YouTube. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. One more show this week. That'll be tomorrow. Get you set for the weekend and some other things that I really want to talk about around the New Orleans Pelicans. I appreciate y'all being here with me right after the game on a live show. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, this is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, your team part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow. There's the video. Bye.